here we are again, first time in 2023. Boy, does that sound odd to say. 2023. We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I am Bill Carell, and I have with me today two of my lovely friends, Lisa Sheehan and Jan Jeremias, and they're lovely spiritually and physically and every other way. We have come through a very interesting set of holidays with a lot of different things at play. And it almost feels like it's kind of good to get back to the routine. That's me talking. I don't know how you feel about it, but so today to kind of pop around, it's the beginning of the year, and so it seems like the last 2 years we've had the year beginning. We talked about rebirth and renewal and that sort of thing. We talked about completion and conclusion uh, last podcast, and I'm just wondering if there's room for us to talk about optimism and hope today. How's that sound to you?
Mhm. Always good.
Think we can work on that? Okay. So, do either of you have any thoughts on that before we get the dictionary out?
Yeah, I'm doing the dictionary.
Thank you very much.
I think I would start out by being someone who always, I don't know if I do set goals, but who always has an idea or let's say a design as to how I want something to turn out. Like that just tends to be, and I think we all do that. We have like an agenda of a way we think about something. And coming from experience now where this year, what I did at the end of 2022 is I evaluated my year as, let's say, I looked at success of the success of my year, and I redefined the word success. So I looked at success as being the relationships I built and the people I met and the experiences I had versus kind of concrete goal success, which I might have labeled as I failed because I didn't get done or I'm not at the level I wanted to be. And that kind of framed my coming year to be a lot more hopeful and optimistic because I think I reevaluated my last year as being a great year in that way,
Yeah.
as being very successful. So that's now I'm moving forward into this year. And so I would offer to people is look at, take a moment to reflect on your last year and, you know, reframe the way maybe you were thinking about it and see whether that gives you a different flavor and a different way to move forward.
Great. Lisa?
Well, I thought because I found it interesting what the uh, dictionary said because the first one is, of course, hopeful and confident about the future, but the second one is involving an overestimate.
It's very apropos for what I said.
Right? Previous estimates may be wildly optimistic. Is their sentence.
Yes. The offer that you're expecting to get on your home is maybe a little optimistic.
But it
So,
still means positive to us, strange in a strange way. You're just being a little overly about it. The goal is a little elevated, but they can always, like they say, reach for the stars, then you might still catch the moon, kind of thing.
yeah. So to me, I'm hearing the ultimate access to empowerment is exactly what Jan said. The reframing isn't necessarily having a conversation, an intellectual conversation with yourself about, well, look, this is how you think it is, and guess what, you made that up, so you can make it be anything you want. And the whole notion of uh, missing your goals, of being a failure, is really cool if you've got a great relationship with that word. If what that word says to you is just something I've not been able to cross off my to-do list yet, and it's still there, and I'm still, raring to go to get it done, and it still makes some sense to me. I still want to do it, right? So the neat part of this whole end of the year thing, and the crush to get things done by the so-called due dates or the deadlines or what have you. You know, I think you and I live like what other ex- exterior external forces have to bring to bear, and the deadlines that they bring are the ones that we have to live inside. And those the tension between that and what you think is really happening can bring stress. It can bring all sorts of heartburn. Um, and guess what? It's just a matter of those things aren't real. And I heard this really great quote, which is basically whenever you think you know something, laugh. It's not true. It just seems that way. Step back a little bit, take a new look, see what it seems like from that point. You don't like what it looks like, step to the side, take a look at it from there, see what that seems like.
I always look at it as being almost very concrete. I remember it really struck me as um, I used to I used to hike a lot, and I remember if I hiked a loop, doing it in one direction was great, but then reversing it and doing it in the opposite direction because then you actually saw different things because you weren't coming from the same direction. So that's
Right.
what it reminds me of, Bill, is like step back, take another look from a different perspective, and see if you can relook at whatever you were quote unquote labeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of like all of the relatives with the hustle and bustle. Before you got on, I was saying to Lisa, there was, quite a bit of stuff where people were acting crazy. Like December 25th is like this really, really bad day if it comes and happens before you get everything done, right? And it's kind of like silly. Why would you buy into a way of being and an existence whereby you have to suffer? Unless you get something out of demonstrably suffering, from the people around you.
And there's
There are
such a
people
level
who,
of suffering.
yeah,
People suffering can come at any moment. Or, I mean, when I was younger, like if they changed any sort of tradition, my mother would say to be careful around me and break it to me gently
yeah,
because I hated when people did that. But now I look at it so differently. And because, we switched years ago from buying gifts for everybody to just drawing one name. And then, my dad was going, "Oh, can I drop out?" And the boys are like, "I don't know what to get anybody." And then the boys are bad at buying. So I said, "You know what? What if everybody gives me and my sisters the money? We do all the shopping. We give out the gifts on Christmas Day." And everybody loved it. I mean, my father can't stop raving about it. And everybody was open to the change though. If somebody had perked up and said no, I don't know what would have happened, but because it was and I initiated it, which is unusual for me to, initiate a change, but it worked out so well. So, that's another thing to relook at things that you always thought were the way to do something.
yeah. And what it comes down to is whenever there is a seeming need for optimism and hope, which are both phantoms, they don't exist. You make it up in the moment, like there is something to be hopeful about. Well, Werner Erhard always used to say, "There is no hope. What's going to happen is going to be what you do." And it does not live in the domain of hope. There's not like a divine providence out there that is going to all of a sudden grant your three wishes and allow you to become millionaire, married to the most a perfect mate on the planet, and then have a great place to live for the rest of your life. If you build it, you will get it, and there is no hope. So if you're hoping, that is a distraction from the being mindful as to what's called for in the moment and responding to it appropriately with the maximum benefit of your adult capabilities, whatever they are right now. And if you're not able to grasp it, then you recognize it wasn't that you didn't hope hard enough. You just have a little bit more to do in terms of developing your skills. And that kind of made a lot of sense to me. The whole
I
idea
hope,
of
yeah.
being in a
Hope can
state,
be,
right?
yeah, well, it could be, but it could be your catalyst. I was listening to somebody at the end of the year about he's not fond of vision boards. And the reason being is because it's such a precise picture of something. And, he gave a story about a woman that had, this precise picture of the house that she wanted. And then, but she had gone through the process of, and I've heard this a million times with manifestation, you have to know the feeling that it brings. You have to know the emotion that's behind it. What you're really looking for is not the object itself, but the feeling that it gives you. So she, found this house, and it was almost the exact picture of what she had on her vision board, but she didn't have the feeling. So she called him and she said, "Would I be stupid to say no to this house?" He's going, "No, it's not the right house." And then, of course, randomly later on, she was detoured down a road, and she put GPS on, and it took her to down this road, and there was a for sale sign in this house that looked nothing like the one that she wanted. But she took herself in there, went inside the door, and knew she was home.
I kind of agree with your friend. I think people almost like the Bible literalists,
Yeah.
versus the ones who use it as kind of like a compass and a place to get inspiration from, and to be thought provoking, and to really kind of evolve. We I'm older than vision boards, okay? And I went through a program where we did all this collaging and all this sort of thing to gain access to different types of emotions and then say things about it. And wasn't my cup of tea. I'd rather just give you a hug, and let's move on. But as far as a vision board goes, I can see why people do those and why it's so important, and they get a lot of benefit out of it if they do, right? But if that's not your thing, you can still write goals. You can still have conversations, for possibility with your friends, and conversations for opportunity, and that you can always go back and change. And
Hmm.
maybe the vision board was something that needed to be upgraded. Maybe it's dynamic as the person who made it and created it was. It's why goals are something that's only useful if it's something that you consider that is very powerfully um, worth having this journey for. Okay,
Hmm.
and as you said, that it's the satisfaction of the experience or having gained something that you intentionally went after, and now you can do the next thing that you want to go after. It's very, very affirming and very reinforcing, or it can be.
Well, I
Right. And
think
I think yeah, the vision board represents hope. You don't stick with it, but you have a visual of what your desires are for the next year. Let's put it that way, or for the next whatever amount of time.
So
And that's
can
what
I?
he said too.
Yeah. Can I nitpick with you?
Yeah.
It could be hope. It could be intent. It could be intentionality. It's like what you put on that board is forsaking everything that you don't put on that board in that model, right? You
Yeah.
can
With
still
three.
want other things, but the things that are driving you long term are the things that you put on the board. You
Hmm.
better have had a really good day when you made that vision board, unless you have ones with magic, or there's those little color forms things that you can put on and take off. And that's the reason that most people don't accomplish goals, right? Or vision boards. Strong coaching along with the vision board, and strong community support, and a whole lot of drive and belief in yourself.
Right.
And those may be interpreted by other people as being optimistic,
Yep. Or
or
hopeful.
or
I mean,
positive. Yeah.
yeah, I guess I look at vision boards, and I've always looked at vision boards slightly different. It just is it's not even a hope. It's just to me, I had a vision board which I had up in my kitchen, which I used to see every day. And it was just this constant reminder of what, like, in my face, like, because I would look at it, this constant kind of reminder. And it wasn't like I felt like I was doing, I mean, some of those things, it wasn't like I could actively do anything toward necessarily, but it would
Right.
just keep them at the forefront of my brain. And it was interesting how many of those actually came about without me. What I would say, at some point or another, maybe I did do some practical steps toward them, but it wasn't like goal setting to me. It was much more like, these are things that I would like to come about, and I don't want to forget about them. And these are, so it had a different feel for me than that, because goals, like, okay, I have a plan, and this is the exact steps I need to do to reach that goal. And that's not how I looked at a vision board as being.
That I completely agree with you. And I'll tell you right now, one size does not fit all for anything that you capture and put down, structurally. because if you only have it in conversations, conversations disappear. So the idea of being disappointed with a house that looks exactly like the one you put on your vision board and not getting the feeling out of it, well, that's what should happen. You're a human being, right? And I love what you said, Jan. What this is the law of attraction in a nutshell. The whole idea is to constantly be reminded of what's important to you in life and be sending out the vibes into the universe that can be answered by like kind of vibes coming back, and at some point gaining that satisfaction and the feeling that Lisa was talking about. And you can get that in the moment without having the actual piece of cheese, right? You don't have to win the vision board to really feel like you've had a good day.
And I think we've talked about that before too, like the catalyst for people to repeat reaching anything is to take the journey as the actual reward. So the whole process of getting there is actually the fun part.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can't do that, but if you I think it's easy, not easy to train, but it's a different way of looking at things. And if you could set your mind to do that as you're achieving or looking at that vision board, and say, what fun can I have trying to get that today, that kind of thing.
And also, to what you said originally, Lisa, was that feeling or that the experience itself,
Right.
like the experiential part of it, because I think that that's what keeps people consistent. So I look at like my yoga practice, which is very hard to explain to people, like sometimes like what yoga is, like yeah, and but once someone experiences it, that's what keeps them coming back because they understand what it feels like to feel at peace or to feel at one, even
Yeah.
if it's just for a few moments. And it's very hard to describe to someone necessarily because it is somewhat individual. And but once you have it, that's what keeps people practicing for years and years and years. And that's that kind of venture of I want that feeling again. So I'll do it again. And I think that with something like a vision board or reaching, having a hope or whatever, it's that real tactile feeling, whether you feel that in your like where you feel it in your body and the sensations you get, the smells, the and everything is having it be very I almost think of like a physical experience, a somatic experience.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to accomplish that being reminded. And some people do it, by taping a memo to themselves, so just an audio file. Don't you dare forget today that this is the best day you've ever had, and it's probably not going to be as good as tomorrow, because tomorrow will be the best day that you had. But while you're doing it today, look around and really notice what really makes you happy. Look at where you are and look at when you're not happy and see if you can generate happiness in that moment. See if there's some self-talk that you can do, or you can come up with a way to rephrase the moment, reframe it, and now get yourself to a place where it's hard work, yes, but it's enjoyable hard work because you're winning. All you have to do is keep going and finish. You can do this. I believe in you. Love, Bill.
And I had the like when something's taken away, you kind of, you definitely realize how important or how much you value it.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, because I had COVID at the beginning of December, and while I work from home, so I'm not in a social atmosphere like ever unless I do it myself. And normally I'm out at least, well, at least one night a week, and usually more. And when I couldn't go out and be with people, especially those I care for the most, you know, I was it reinforced so much how much I love doing that, connecting with people like all the time. And if I can't do it, it's like when health disappears, you suddenly, when you're healthy again, and the same thing happened with COVID when I was healthy again. I was like, oh my God, this is great.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I was sick for about 2 weeks in December. And when you're unhealthy, all of a sudden it's like anything, when we don't have it, all of a sudden we realize its value,
Mhm.
whether that's people, places, health. It's just
I can tell you at some level, I probably had said the two words, I'm depressed, more in the last 6 weeks than I probably have in the last 6 years.
Oh.
I really just have to name it every once in a while and say, it's just one of the possible ways to be for this moment. And my training says that if you can presence something, it'll disappear. And if I do it effectively, and I'm naming something incorrectly and I say I'm depressed and it doesn't hang with me, then I go, well, no, that's not it.
Mhm.
It might look a little bit more like I'm lonely, or it
Mhm.
might look a little bit like I'm grieving, or some other, you know, feeling or sensation that matches, and I get a little response from the inside that basically my stomach moves a little bit and I go, yeah, that's it.
'Cause we've talked about the feeling wheel before, right? I mean, other lots of people have talked, have used it, where you think there's one thing and it's like, the like 6 basic emotions and then but it
Yeah,
travels out so many and once you identify it, like you said, then you could deal with it better because
right.
it's right on the nose. That's what it is.
And
I
there's power in distinguishing it. It's power in not just living like, with the first answer, yeah, that was it, and it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
One of the things I've done through the years is take whatever the word I think I'm feeling. So let's say it's fear or anger or whatever, is to write that word down vertically and
Mm,
then make words from each letter.
That's brilliant.
I like that.
Because what it does is it kind of diffuses the actual word, like the label that we have. So,
Right.
and you can do it with any word. I mean, from from fear could come fierce and forgiving, and I mean, it doesn't have to be a negative word that stems from each letter. And all of a sudden, you look at the word and you realize, oh, it's just a word. We label it, and we get, I think, trapped in what the label is sometimes. It's like we get trapped in the word itself of fear because we equate that word as being a negative word. So we get very trapped in that. And then all of a sudden, one, not only does it help you fine tune how you feel, but it helps you break down the word into being just a word. It's just a word. And I feel the
False
way I,
evidence appearing, yeah. False evidence appearing real.
Very real. Yeah.
right. Or
Mhm.
ego, which is edging God out.
Yep. And but making up your own on the fly is that sounds really cool too.
Yeah. So, but I started doing that a while ago
That's
with
cool.
taking the word vertically. And I think it's a really powerful exercise for people to do.
And the other thing is rather than sitting and suffering for a long period of time, you can punctuate it by identifying it's just, I don't know what it is, but I'm stuck. Okay.
Mhm.
Right.
And what stuck feels like is, I don't know, I literally don't know what to do next. And so the the cure for being stuck or being inactive in an unpowerful and unrewarding way is action, any
Mhm.
kind of action at all. And so even if it's just dissecting a word and making up some new paradigm to view that word in, as you talked about, Jan, that's being in action. You're
Mhm.
now occupied, your mind is moving on something else. You're not sitting here having those disempowering thoughts and that just complete the shutdown process.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think we tend to feel in certain circumstances like that is helplessness.
Yes.
And when you the whole idea of being active or is being empowered, and it takes away that feeling of helplessness, which nobody wants to feel helpless. Like there's no options.
We used to talk about maybe 7 or 8 different things that you could do in an instant anywhere in the world. One is get up and shout. Okay. Another one is to stand up and do 10 jumping jacks. Another one is stand up and do 2 minutes of power, a power stance, right? Or pick the phone up and call somebody and tell them you love them. Just keep adding things to the list. And for the first 5 or 6 don't work, keep going. And then at some point you get,
I'll say hug a pet because there's nothing like, when I'm feeling, um, upset or stressed. Like during COVID, I always say I was hugging Tonka so much in the beginning. He would look at me, go, "Mom, really another hug? Give me a little space." But anything you can do. if you can spend time around babies or kids, they're always a great way to get you out of
Yeah,
feeling,
that's another really good point. You know, that we learn the most about ourselves as human beings is by being responsible for another living thing. And so I agree with you. You know, get on the horn and call somebody you know that has a 2-year-old and has to talk to them.
I teach it when I teach yoga online on Wednesdays. One of my students for like a year and a half would bring her granddaughter, who I then got to see because she started when she was like 2 months old. So by the time, like now, she's like a year and a half, almost two. So I've watched her grow up every week.
Yeah,
So like 2 weeks ago, the entire class, she kept on bringing up this Lego tower to the screen for me to like nod and smile at. It was so funny because when she got on, I said to her, "Oh my gosh, look at that tower you built." So then every like 5 seconds, she would come up to the screen and hold. There's nothing like, you might be doing a challenging pose, but you see that kid with a Lego wall or whatever. There's no way not to smile.
that's fun. It's absolutely fun. So I'm noticing I need more babies and more pets in my life here. That's
Mhm.
definitely a big
But you
missing
can
for me.
borrow Tonka anytime you want. He'd be
I
happy.
can't wait.
He'd be happy to get another buddy.
He's such a good boy.
He is a good boy. But
So we're kind of like looking at hope as that might be the on ramp to something. Don't ever hear me say like I think there's something wrong with it, but I don't think you want to really dwell there. You know what I mean? I can remember as a child coming home from mass on Sunday, and we had an Irish Catholic priest, and his sermons were always, fire and brimstone, and yes, you are a sinner, and God died for you, and you need to take that on, whatever, right? So she would come home and she said, I really do like Father Miller, but you know what he never preaches about? He never preaches about hope. And I thought, I that was on my forehead for a long time. Like, yeah, hope's a good thing. Like, I hope I'm going to get a good passing grade on this test. I didn't study, but you know, the hope kind of looked to me like a red herring. And the reason I say that was what I found was hope almost always came up when I felt like I was insufficient for something. If I knew I could just do it, no need for hope, right? Hope's like winning the lotto.
well, insufficient maybe, but I think of coming up without a plan. It's like you said, not studying. I hope I'll do well. And I had this conversation with my mother recently as I was talking about care for her and my father. And
Yes.
I said, and she said to me, "Well, don't worry. We'll just hope everything's going to be okay." And I'm sitting there going, "Okay, that's a really good plan." Like we'll just hope everything's going to be good.
Or you might hedge your bets and get your button gear, right?
Right, right, right.
The
So,
plan is the plan is the thing that I think um, follows the hope in terms of identifying the actions that you can take, or the ones where are going to be a little offbeat for you and may have some mischief involved with it, but it's not going to take you down a notch every time something unexpected happens. Having the plan gives you a place to regroup to the last thing that worked and then move on from there again, utilizing that scientific process, right?
So do you want to hear what the dictionary says for hope?
Sure.
A feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. And the archaic definition is a feeling of trust.
Feeling of trust.
Yes.
well, I was going to say about hope because hope to me has this, you were talking about religion. Hope has this element of faith in it to me. And when I say faith, is faith in something greater than yourself, whether you call whatever you label that to be. So I think of the hope has this element of faith, of
Yeah.
that people might have and a power that's outside. But then I also think of the phrase that, God helps those who help themselves. So that's what I said to my mother.
When you're in the lifeboat, pray to God, but row to the shore.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's like the story of the man who is in a really, really bad storm. And, he says, "Oh, I'll just pray to God and God will save me." And he ends up dying and goes to heaven, and he says to God, "Well, here I was praying for you." And he said, "And you didn't come." And he said, "Well, what do you mean I didn't come? I sent a lifeboat, I sent a helicopter, I sent all these things." And, so basically he was like, "I'll wait for God to save me." And he was like, "You just missed it. I was sending all these ways for God to help you, for you to get on board and be saved." So,
Yeah, it's again that whole reframing, like it's not working out like my vision board. So don't worry, God will make the vision board come true, you know?
right,
And I realize that most people that have a vision board don't approach it that way. But still and again, I love the whole notion of being a positive person as opposed to being hopeful and optimistic. And the distinction between those is that positive is an attitude in a direction that's in motion, right? Where hope uh, and optimism can be passive and actually make no difference in the world. And I bet you there's 30 other definitions of it that could flip that on its head and make them very, very powerfully part of the process. But it's when you have this choice between different types of things that you can do, and I believe hope is one of the seven virtues, right? So I mean, it's a very, very good thing, and it's also an archaic thing, as we just heard. It's been around for a very long time, and I just want to know, if you're in a situation where action is called for, you want to shift from a state in which you're not being active and you think something good's going to happen, or you think something bad's going to happen, but you have to react to it, and you don't do it, you'll get one set of outcomes. And if you do it, you'll get a different set of outcomes. But while you're in the middle of doing what you're doing, you're not sitting there being in that state you were where you needed to have hope.
well, I looked up the word origin. I like word origins, so I looked up hope. So it says in Old English, one of it is to hope for, to trust in God's word. So the whole
100%.
element of also to have trust or confidence, assume confidently or trust that something is or will be so. But the whole idea of trusting in a higher power, I guess you could call it.
Well, there's some, I think, interesting um, slipperiness to that, and that is that we're, like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where we believe that God wants for us what we want for us, and so forth. He'll take care of that, and the vision board's a done deal, just a matter of when. And I think that's where my mother was coming from. Was that she was the youngest of eight children, or actually the next to the youngest of eight children, and her eldest sister was 28 years older than her. So most of her life was hoping, and then somebody else gave it to her. So that's how she got trained, being the baby for such a long time, and they all took care of her.
Hmm.
And then when she got out on her own, she really wasn't that good at life. The whole thing was like a total surprise to her because she never had built any muscle of doing things for herself.
Do that.
It all depends, what experience of the journey do you want to have. And I think that plan and packing a really good lunch for, making sure that there's cookies and other enjoyable things along the way, not literal cookies, but we can't just keep working and grinding without having some little rewards, right? Some kind of good feeling, somebody smiles at you, or you go in, to your favorite restaurant like we did last night. The meal's over, the check comes over, I open it up, and it says it's taken care of.
No.
Two of us sat there, and we were just overcome. I mean, it wasn't the money or anything. It's just what a wonderful, thoughtful gesture, and how they can let us know how much they love us and how much they know we love them.
And I also think of just looking at what I always call the basics, and basics not being, but really the fundamental things, and noticing those along the way. because I think then when you have little setbacks or points at which you might say, okay, you're losing hope or things are getting challenging, then
Yeah,
have something to look back on and sit there on a day and say, okay, well, not everything happened the way I quote unquote wanted, but look at the positive things, or look at this that did happen. I had a great
sure.
conversation with so and so, or whatever it is. But I think it's important to take those little measurements throughout the day to just remind yourself so that you can stay in that optimistic or more positive frame of mind.
Yeah, and the positive frame of mind is when you're not suffering, and that's what distinguishes positive for me. It's
Mhm.
the absence of suffering. It may not even be joy, okay, but it is absolutely not suffering. And the antithesis of optimism is pessimism. Pessimism, and I would say that that is living in a state of being where you mostly are not enjoying things very much.
And I think because I've been, and what, like Jan was saying, I get constant reminders. I've noticed I get constant reminders just by being a friend to someone. So when I'm trying to tell them things to look at, or that there's nothing wrong with feeling the way you're feeling either, which is, kind of a new concept for a lot of people, which is, kind of a harsh way to look at things. Like, I don't have the right to be feeling this way, or why am I feeling this way? And I, tell my friend who, suffers from anxiety that it's fine. It's okay. Reach out to people, do what you have to do. There's nothing wrong with it. And so then it makes me look at my life in a different way, like how lucky I am too. So just those reminders, like Jan said, to look at things like from that vantage point of the everyday things that are out there. I mean, when I take morning walks where the sun is in the morning is,
Right,
suddenly became important to me. It's like, wow, that's so cool. Like the little things of not noticing it before.
right. Or depending on what your, whether to what you're saying, Lisa, depending on what your kind of tendency is. So, say you do something that you don't like, and so you tend to be overly critical of yourself for that. It's kind of like, well, this is part of, this is who I am, and is it really that? Like, label it, like however you frame it. Is it really, is it really a character flaw? Like, is it really bad, or am I just being overly hard on myself about this? And could I just let it go?
Well, see, that's the really interesting thing. The more you say, whenever I think I'm right about something, I'm not. So give it up and let's go see what's going on. The interesting other corollary that you mentioned, and the three of us are so blessed to have had a particular kind of training that most of the rest of the population doesn't get. And that population is not sitting at home going, if it is to be, it's up to me, right? Like I'm responsible for everything in my life and everything good and everything bad, right? That's not a common, way to look at things out there. The more common response to that is to figure out strategies and tactics and formulas, and either to keep it from happening or to get it over on somebody else, and that just doesn't make the world better and doesn't make their life better. But they don't know that they don't know that, as you said, there are tools that we can pick up and we can start to use along the way. And that whole idea of having a plan. We talk about, Quester's way, and the whole hero's journey, and that being a helix, and that it's all about, taking the time to decide what you want, vision board, goals, whatever it is, maybe just getting lunch, right? And then you sort of strategize what the steps are going to be and have a good idea of what you're going to do if something doesn't work out. And so you go put it into play, and then you keep at it until you've accomplished the goal. And then you take a minute or two. I mean, so you finish the sandwich, you go, well, how could I make that sandwich better the next time? And what kind of bread would this really taste good on that I didn't have today that I got to put on my shopping list? And maybe this is the kind of thing I want to share with some friends of mine because it's just that good. And now it's time to set a new circle, right? So having that tool available, telling kids that they have the possibility in any moment to transform it's their birthright, by the way. This is not something that only special people get. anyone can be trained to look at their life like a game of empowerment, of love, of plenty, and attraction. And when they see their future that way, it's not hope. It's like, I'm going places. The end.
I think too, because I love to watch, like, if there's a favorite of mine that's a neuroscientist, and just the fact of how our brains are made up, the
Yeah.
fact that if you have a negative thought, your brain fires off every neural pathway to every negative thing that ever happened to you in your life, and just starts shooting them at you. And then, you just think like, oh my God, my life is horrible. And the only way to do it is to stop them, which is hard to do. But, if people like to just keep repeating their negative things that have happened, well, this happened. So, like, and all these other things happened to me over the past 20 years, but you have
So
to
it must
stop
be a character flaw, right?
following it. Yeah. I mean, but it's so fun to stay in the pattern to a lot of people, but to break it is hard. And I think that's what the three of us, like in our little our not little trainings, in our major trainings, have learned. That's what we're doing, is stopping those negative thoughts in their tracks and focusing on something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about because I'm doing this workshop, this grief program and on overcoming grief. I'm leading with someone else, and we were talking about creating what we call a smile journal. And it's basically when you're on one of those waves of grief. We're doing a program on pet loss, and is literally taking a moment to remember one of the fond memories that you had with your pet, to shift out of that pattern. Because what happens to a point when you're in a place like that, or no matter, it doesn't matter the emotion, is we start to identify with that emotion,
Yeah.
and it becomes so much a part of us, we don't know who we are without it.
Right.
Yeah. That whole no hope or hopelessness is it's the doorstep to resignation. It's the doorstep to never coming out of your cave again. And quite frankly, that's a natural way for people to behave. But Lisa, I absolutely loved what you said with regard to, if you say something negative about something that just occurred, it goes out and it says, "What y'all got out there? Bring it on in now." And it does. So the easiest thing is to just stop with that and say, here's what I love about my life. I love the woman that I'm married to. I love where I live. I love my grandson. I love Tonka and Jan and Lisa. And okay, let's get back to work here. That was a nice little pity party, and I'm on to the next thing.
Yeah. I'm on to you. I'm on
Yeah,
to
yeah,
you.
yeah. I'm on to you. Yes. Y'all
But
pulled
I
the
think
wool over my ears. Yeah.
right. But I think there's some sort of relief knowing that your body, your brain is actually doing that to you.
Yes.
That you're not broken. It's just what physically is happening inside your brain because it's built that way.
Yes. So I have a woman friend who I call her the queen of happiness. She has done corporate happiness training for about 30 years, and she's got books that she's written and co-authored and all this kind of stuff. Her name is Joanna Brandy. She's down in Boca Raton, and one of her short books that I like is "Do Not Listen to What You Think." That's a great little title.
Yeah.
It's a grabber.
I was
Oh, even like, go ahead, Jan.
No, I was went to a lecture given by a guy named Michael Lewis not too long ago, who wrote a book, When Two Brains Collide, and a number of other books. And he was talking about concussion and brain and TBI, traumatic brain injury, and
Sure.
um, but he was talking about rebuilding the brain with components that the brain is made of. So that's part of what he was talking about. And I think about what Lisa said in that pattern. It's kind of like you're rebuilding the brain
Hmm.
by offsetting those, whatever that traumatic event, and then instead of replaying that traumatic event, and every traumatic event you've ever had is is then filling the brain with rebuilding the brain in a different way.
Well, there's that, and sometimes if you find yourself in a swarm of bees, you get the hell out. And quite frankly, there are a lot of people who walk around with buzzing in their head 24/7. I mean, it's like that book that Steven Tyler wrote. Is this screaming in my head bothering you?
Because I crack up too every time when you listen to Eckhart Tolle's start of his journey was when he was like so depressed and he said, I can't stand myself. And then he went, wait a minute, who's saying that?
Yeah,
There's another dark voice in my head. I don't have to listen to that one.
yeah, yeah. You had sent me, I think, a Joe Rogan, or was it
Oh,
um,
Jordan Peterson.
Elon Musk with Eckhart Tolle?
Oh no, yeah, Russell Brand.
Oh, it was Russell Brand, even more incredible. That's a guy, and I love him. I really do. I love all those men that I just mentioned for all very much different reasons, but mostly they're not scared of pissing people off. You
Oh
know what
no.
I mean? No, tell it like it is. Let the chips fall where it may. And once we've cleaned up that little mess of broken glass, maybe we move on in a better place than we started from, you know?
But even
But
like
they never
saying,
walk
yeah,
away.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it like Eckhart Tolle's sayings could piss people off just because people wouldn't want to face the truth, and it could be the simplest, very soft-spoken comment, and people,
Agreed.
So and Russell Brand just yells it. So
Well, to what you said, Lisa, about that listening to those messages that the brain is giving us, I think that that's why I've always done the outward messages that come in from others that are negative. I tend to. That's why you kind of selectively decide who you're going to spend time around sometimes.
yep,
The people you're going to surround yourself with, because the people are always spewing negative things, depending on the frame of mind you're in, sometimes can be very challenging to tolerate if you're already in a space that may be negative.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're getting all those other messages. And I think the media is really great at that in their perpetuation of fear or whatever, fear based programming, and the fact that that's the space you tend to navigate from, being bombarded by that all the time is overwhelming.
Yes. And that's where you have to tip the scales in your own favor. Most people do not know that the thoughts that are in their head are not them. They say, this is who I am.
Mhm.
And they are wrong. You are not your thoughts. And the neat part of any thoughts that are not serving you, this is where you start getting involved in things that really do take care of you, bring you joy, bring you happiness, new sentences to say. When something didn't work, like just as simple as if it, we're thrown, our society raises us with this background notion that we're in a soup of there's something wrong around here. There's something wrong. That's the underneath everything. You're scared to say hello to some people because you're afraid it's going to blow up. There's something wrong, and your behavior is in line with that. And so it's always going to be what's wrong with you, what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with it, the system, or just what's going on around us that we have no chance of making a difference with. And so we have to come up with an answer there. This is what happens when I do this. Like that's a recurring sentence for a lot of people. It always is. It never is. Those kinds of sentences are not responsible sentences. They do not come up with options and game plans that you can put in play for when something happens, you interact with what it is. You find out what it is, and then you take an appropriate action with your adult skills at that particular moment. And sometimes if you don't know what it is, you just declare it as a breakdown. Rocks are rocks, trees are trees, and breakdowns are breakdowns. This didn't work. This is one of those breakdowns. And once you've done that, there's no, need to cling to trying to find a solution in an argument or with this, self-loathing or hating the system and the IRS or whatever it is. It comes right down to what moves you back into action again. How can you take this period of being stopped or stuck and make it smaller and smaller and smaller over time so that when that occurs, you've got access to those tools that we were talking about to get you going again, even if for a week or two it's just hugging Tonka.
Mhm.
And then you build on it.
Well, and I think the other thing is totally identifying with thoughts, or to think you're totally identifying with an emotion. I think is the same thing. And I think I shared in the group chat that mindfulness, um, moving through mindfulness with sort of like very strong emotions that I sent and passed over from Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah.
And I think that, they don't sit there and say, the emotion is within me, but I'm not that emotion. I'm never anger. There's anger within me.
Yeah.
That's why
And I
like the
want to just
Celtic.
mention that, excuse me,
What you said?
that just one second. That's a senior conversation. That's not for somebody who never opened up Deepak Chopra or Wayne Dyer or any of those. The folks that have the mentality of I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm not giving it up. Like our grandfathers and great grandfathers. That's how it is. They would go to the death with something that even if they knew it was wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm saying we can be in agreement here, and it's like I have this little discussion with Ken from time to time too. No, Ken, you got to be trained to get to this level where you're talking about. And I think that what's missing, in my opinion, and I could be wrong about this, not what's wrong with society, it's what's right about the way that this can be taught. What difference having these tools and this ability to be self, correcting, and this to listen to yourself, listen. So forgive me for jumping in there, but I'm saying that we have mastery in particular areas here, but we also have to take into consideration that the listeners may have 5 children running around. They may have a family that's not giving them any help whatsoever, and they really are having they're living inside of resentment, or they're living inside of something really unpowerful. And my invitation is to put some more time in and get some muscle in what we're talking about here, especially if you make a recommendation like that.
And I think that's the beauty of the internet now too, because I mean you
Agreed.
can do the simplest thing of in YouTube and look up happiness instead of and then of course it'll send you all different happiness things,
Yeah.
whereas opposed to like, someone I know dearly, love dearly is in a space of not taking responsibility for anything, and then they start looking up words like narcissism and then every narcissistic video comes screaming at them. It's like type in a different word.
You're going to be wasting your time looking at something on the internet anyway. Why not make your life better while you're doing it? So
Yeah.
I love the whole conversation. And Jan, with some of the I don't have your grounding and your reading and all the rest of that sort of thing. And I love it when you mention it, because it gives me the opportunity to go and see what you're talking about. Like Ken, when he started mentioning the Stoics, and I didn't really hadn't ever had any time to like dive into that. For some reason, I was busy doing something other than making my life better. So
I agree with Lisa that so many, like all these teachers are on YouTube and have videos out there that are any length from, a minute to 20-minute classes.
yeah,
And most of the basic tools are really simple and don't cost any money. Like it doesn't cost any money to breathe.
Mhm.
And you don't have to spend a lot of money to consciously breathe.
yeah,
And hopefully, depending on what your circumstances are, I don't want to label anybody who has any sort of physical kind of, but, let's say, I don't know, if you can move in some way. So most of these things are readily or hopefully, that's why I always liked walking, because it didn't require a huge investment. Hopefully, you can, Lisa will attest to that now that she takes these morning walks. Is you put on a pair of some sort of shoes and either you find a good place to walk and go outside for 10, 15 minutes, even five
yeah.
minutes.
Well, when you were talking about yoga, what the experience is like. It's like riding a bicycle or swimming, and rhythmic breathing. You have to actually do it before you can sort of understand what it really is. And after I spent a month in the hospital back in 2008, part of my recovery, physical recovery plan, was doing yoga 3 to 4 times a week. And there was this program that Jan had a VHS tape, and I don't remember the woman's name, but she was blonde, and it was on a beach, and there was like 3 or 4 different shaped and aged people, and with modeling different types of yoga you could do depending on what your actual flexibility and strength was. But and I'll tell you, it was torture the first maybe half dozen times I did it. And I mean, for me, yoga was getting the piece of cheese at the end where I had a 15-minute cool down and then sometimes fell asleep, you know?
Mhm.
Right. When you
But
got
yeah, all my muscles were screaming in unison, and my joints hurt and all the rest of that. But by the time I'd done it like 15 or 20 times, it was almost like, wow, where did that 50 minutes go?
I mean, I guess it also depends on the style. I don't teach like that anymore, so I can't say that. I
Yeah.
don't. I don't think anybody would have a. I think anybody could take my class and get something out of it, but I think it is the feeling I'm describing is this feeling of, like I said, inner peace and oneness. It's like
Yeah.
where your thoughts just quiet and you truly get focused on your breath. And and talk about responsibility when it's quiet, and if you don't kind of decide, oh, I give up, there's no place to go but be with yourself. And sometimes that's the last place you want to be, but it's a great way to sort of confront and sort of see who you really are, because you're like, okay, well,
It's helpful to do that armed with the information of, no, you're not static like the vision board. You can upgrade things, you can learn new stuff, and old dogs do learn new tricks. That's just how it goes.
it is.
If you don't try, it won't work. But if you put some effort into something and build some muscle and whatever the skill is, even if it's thinking and even if it's just listening to your thoughts and having, you know, an internal badminton racket or something like that, where you just swat that bad boy right out of here.
I used to
I
always
always think
I used to always say, envision that when you sit down in a class and you could take all your thoughts and put it in a suitcase and park it outside the door. And then if you decide you want to pick up your suitcase when you leave, you can.
It'll be waiting for you. Yeah.
It'll be waiting for you if you really so desire to pick up the stuff you came in with.
Well, that's funny. One in the '90s, I was so committed to accomplishing what I consider to be some pretty big things, right? And so I was listening to someone, and we were talking about, that period of time from the breakdown to being stuck, and that how long that is before you can be back into action. And I stole a metaphor. I may have told both of you this before, but I stole a metaphor from Nintendo, where I created this imaginary reset button in the center of my forehead on the inside. I closed my eyes, I would press the reset button, and I'd get a new Mario. All better. Let's get on with bigger and better things here. No, we don't need to worry about that last game. I don't even remember that last game. Let's get moving on. And I found that to be very, very powerful when I remembered to do it. The remembering to do it part is where the real muscle and the mastery comes from.
that's another way to use technology these days too, because so you can set the
Metaphor.
alarms and do all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, you got to start thinking about your bad thoughts as spam. Okay. I mean, seriously, that's all they are. They are spam. They are malicious messages coming in that are intended to infect your soul and ultimately take all your gold and your secrets.
Right. Block sender.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Spam. I like the spam caller.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about that at lunch today too, with all of the telephone calls, emails, all the rest of that stuff. And the interesting part of that is that it's kind of to the point right now where almost every layperson has a working command of this vocabulary of the bad things that can happen to you on the internet, which I think is kind of interesting. But guess what? We have AI here now. And if you haven't looked into AI very much, I would definitely say go to YouTube and do some searches on that. It will blow your mind what is
Yeah.
possible today. Almost anything that you can come up with is immediately, if not sooner, understandable or solvable. You know, if you understand what AI's potential and capabilities are here in the future, there's nothing to get worked up about today. There just isn't. So I'm offering that as a possibility, and you should go do the work yourself. But it's a fun topic, and it can be also very scary. And at the same time, it will help you either understand that it's not about you, and there's nothing you can do about it anyway. So go limp and just have the best life you possibly can.
And that's not just considering AI.
Oh, I know. No, there's enough bad things that they're talking about going to happen to us in the next 9 months. They've been saying that for 3 or 4 years, but
Yeah,
they get looked at, don't they?
but just go live your life. Yep, I like that.
Nobody else going to do it for you.
Nope.
And at the end of the day, they're not going to give you style points while they're busy working on their stuff.
Oh, you sure? I don't know.
No, they'll criticize when they get the opportunity,
Yeah, yeah,
especially when you invite it, right?
yeah.
And even when you don't invite it.
Yep.
That's how it works. You know, that's that rapper song. This is how we do it. Until we don't do it this way, right? Yeah, I love the idea of the pendulum swinging. I'm wondering if the next 25 to 50 years is going to be about finding a completely different model of behavior. You know, things get too far out of whack, they always have to come back to the center and then go to the other. I always thought that was a really good metaphor for explaining a lot of different things. Equilibrium.
Yep.
And this,
Overcorrection too. Like
right, right. So 2023, what does that mean to you?
we're almost out of time. You want to end with that question?
Yeah, we got a minute or two.
Oh, I always think a new year brings hope. So we can circle back right back around again.
That's perfect.
And but I set goals like Jan was talking about too. I mean, it's not my favorite thing to do. I don't write them down. I have to like get rid of that kind of fear, Jan. Um, but I've already started new exercise things. I'm looking at different ways of incorporating healthy things into my life, kind of thing, in more ways. Not only just physically, but mentally and spiritually and relationship wise, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I always choose a word for my year, or words, a few words.
What is it?
That sum up my year. So this year my words are inspired action.
There you go.
And so yeah, and it's interesting the different things I do to kind of keep that word, just like a vision board, kind of in front of me and as a constant reminder. I had a number of people call me up and ask me, or message me and ask me if I would come up with an essential oil that would kind of summarize their word or their intention, so that they could actually do it on a sensory level in addition to doing it maybe more on a physical level, meaning where do you feel that word in your body. And so yeah, so I'm now done. I don't know how many people have messaged me about doing that for them. We'll get in touch, Lisa. I'll be happy to
I was raising my hand for everybody that can't see me raising
There
my
you
hand.
go.
I wanted this oil, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just think that it's interesting. I've kind of created different ways to kind of keep that at the forefront. And I got a real I chose inspired action. And one of my closest friends had gave me a holiday gift like a week ago when I saw her, and I finally opened it up after I had decided on my word. And the title of the book is Leadership in Action. And I was like okay, and that's how it usually comes.
Right.
The year, and I always tell people don't think about the word so much. It'll just kind of pop into your head. You'll be like, oh, that's the word.
It'll find you. Yeah.
It'll find you exactly.
What about you, Bill?
Well, I'll tell you what. Um, for me right now, life is about small steps. And as you know, I'm a coach, business and life coach. And what I find is, the New Year's resolutions that are set are usually gone by the 10th of January, and they're almost always life altering. And the folks that I work with, I tell them, make your resolutions up every day,
Mm.
and each day look for something that, like, the end product, where you want to be down the road. If you want to lose weight, if you want to be physically fit, if you want to have more money in the bank, if you want to have, the love of your life show up, what's the one thing today that you can add to your life that will bring that closer, and the one thing you can eliminate from your life that will bring that closer? One thing, that's it.
Hmm.
Don't change more than 5%, because human beings can't sustain even an 8 to 10% change in their life for very long. So you see people who do a makeover thing and they go to the gym like crazy for the first 2 weeks of the year, then they get an injury, and then they go back and they're eating more. But if you just consciously decide, I'm going to remove starch from my diet for 3 weeks and see what that looks like. Or I'm going to remove alcohol from my life for 3 weeks and just see what that looks like. I'm going to start walking at least 20 minutes a day and see what that looks like. If you can't do 20 minutes a day, then you do 20 minutes every couple of days. You chunk it down, make it doable, and then as you get more strength in that area and you build some muscle, and also are working on listening to your life and being mindful. The main reason that people fail at resolutions is that they can't do the work, and they have negative self-talk about not being able to accomplish their resolution. So why set yourself up for that trip? Set yourself up for something that's really cool. I'm not going to have any alcohol this week and next week, but and on that Saturday night, I'm going out for two IPAs with a very, very good friend.
That's your
So
reward. Yeah.
yeah, so make it fun, make the journey worth doing, and bring other people along if you can. But
I
thank
love
you.
I love that bite-sized goals, because it's like when you teach people to meditate. It's like, don't sit down for 20 minutes. Try 2 minutes,
Yep.
5 minutes, where you're quiet and there's nothing around. Because then when you don't do 5 minutes, you sit there and go down you take out the proverbial whip and you start flailing yourself at some point or another.
Yep, I'm basically a bad and wrong person,
That's right.
Stop
So
it.
don't go there.
Exactly.
Block
God
sender.
loves,
Block sender.
Black
yeah,
under
God loves you, and so do I. So be kind to yourself.
the
Well, I think we've had a good inaugural podcast for 2023. It just blows my mind that that's what the year is and what we're saying. And it also blows my mind how I feel. I am really, really terrific. And I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic and all those good things. And I'm also going to get up and walk after we finish this podcast.
There you go.
Any final thoughts?
Now, I was just looking to see if it was raining because it was pouring here earlier. So I was like, is it raining by you? Because I tried to go out and walk and I got drenched.
Yeah, it was pouring, but I don't hear it right now. So,
Oh, okay.
but I don't think it's supposed to not rain. Let's put it that way.
I know. I've got to go out with Tonka again, but I think
Well, I managed to move my mouse just enough to freeze me. So there I was being stuck, literally, and I'm back now. So with all of that said, folks, thank you very much for a wonderful, wonderful 2022. And I'm going to keep this going just by way of connecting with your friends and your loved ones and relatives, and reach out to somebody this week, or two, or five, or 20, and just tell them that they matter and the world's a better place because they're in it. Let's see how that goes.
There you go.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works, and thank you for your kind attention once again. We're
Have a
now
good
free,
week.
to move about your life.
Put your
Bye-bye.
tray in that position.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.